Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Hank Holland. I'm the chairman and CEO of Amaero International Limited, and I will be chairing, the meeting today. On behalf of all the directors, I'm pleased to welcome you to our annual general meeting for 2023. Thank you for all joining us this morning, and I'm pleased that we're able to host the AGM both in person and online this year. Please note the meeting today is being recorded. As it's now 10 a.m. and as a quorum is present, I declare the meeting open for business. I confirm that the meeting has been properly constituted. Before we commence the formal proceedings of the meeting, I'd like to thank our shareholders for their continued support, many of whom are in the room. And again, thank you very much. In attendance today, next slide, please, are my fellow board members, executive board member Eric Bono to my left, and non-executive board members Omer Granite, David Hanna, Robert Latta, Eric Levy, and Lucy Robb Vujcic. Also in attendance today, we have representatives from Acclaim on behalf of our company secretary, Mark Lisardo, and Deepak Kesha Varmurthy from RSM Australia, the company's auditor. Representatives from Atomic, our share registry, are also in attendance. As previously announced, David Hanna will resign from the board effective the close of the AGM today. On behalf of the board, I'd like to thank David for his service, commitment to Amaero. David's played a key and passionate role in the company. It's particularly helpful for me in the early days that we were involved, and we wish him the best in his future endeavors.
Sorry, one second, Hank.
Should be at slide number 5, please.
Yeah. Apologies.
Okay, thank you very much. The virtual component of this meeting is being held via Zoom using the Atomic platform and enables shareholders and proxy holders to participate in this live webcast of the meeting, as well as ask questions and submit votes. Questions can be submitted at any time. To ask a question, press on the Q&A button on the bottom of the ribbon of your Zoom screen. Type your question in the box and hit send. Please note that while you can submit questions from this point forward, I will not address them until the question session after the formal business. Kindly include the slide number to which your question relates. When we reach the formal business of the meeting, voting on all resolutions will be conducted by poll. Shareholders attending virtually and wishing to vote on the resolutions being put to the meeting can do so through Atomic's investor portal. If you're not already logged into the investor portal, instructions on how to do so can be found in the notice of meeting. A summary of these instructions can also be seen on the screen. If you've already lodged a proxy vote, please note that you do not need to vote again through the online voting portal. Your votes will already be counted in a poll on each resolution as per your proxy instruction. If you have any problem registering your shareholding with Atomic, please call the support number shown on the screen. To allow shareholders time to log in, I now declare the poll open. Online voting is now open and will remain open until it's closed at the end of the formal business. Your votes must be submitted prior to the portal being closed for them to count. The agenda of the meeting is as follows. I will share some chairman's and CEO's remarks. Eric Bono to my left, our president and CTO, will share some remarks. We'll then move to the formal business portion of the meeting, followed by questions that we will take live, as well as those attending via Zoom. With that, let me share a few remarks. The past 100+ days have seen America turn the page on what was, and have seen America complete its restructuring and embrace a promising new chapter. With a can-do, pro-business, and pro-economic growth attitude, stakeholders in Tennessee quickly mobilized support and proposed a package that included a nearing completion 9,300 square meter manufacturing facility, economic incentives, long-term subsidized electricity rates, and a collaboration with the U.S.'s premier national defense laboratory. 1 year ago, on the 1st of November 2022, Amaero lodged an ASX announcement that Pegasus Growth Capital would sub-underwrite a $10.5 million entitlement offer, and that I would assume the role of chairman and chief executive officer. We embarked on an intensive period of corporate restructuring. We explored numerous opportunities, and we reset the strategic direction. And in July, we announced that we would relocate Amaero's manufacturing, applied research and development, and corporate headquarters to Tennessee in the United States. Over the past year, Amaero stock price has risen by approximately 180%. During the same period, the ASX 200 is flat. ASX Small Ordinary Index has lost about 7%. After decades of celebrating globalization and the migration abroad of most manufacturing capabilities, the COVID epidemic, followed by the conflict in Ukraine, exposed the resulting vulnerability to national security and to economic resiliency. With biparty support, which I might add is not common in the U.S. these days, the U.S. has shaped a national policy response with the strategic imperative of reshoring critical and strategic manufacturing and defense production capabilities, as well as securing resilient and scalable supply chains. Given the rise in geopolitical tensions, there's a heightened sense of urgency to invest in defense capabilities and to reestablish a dominant leadership and primacy capabilities such as hypersonics. Amaero was very fortunate to identify a modern, purpose-built manufacturing facility that was nearing completion, picture of which you'll see on this page, and we'll later show you a video of the facility as well. The 9,300 square meter facility has been completed, and the construction fit-out will begin this quarter. Securing a new facility and negating the need to build a facility saved 12 plus months on our timeline to commission equipment and to commence powder production. And we've estimated working capital is reduced by approximately $22 million. The first atomizer has been delivered to the US and is in storage awaiting installation. As announced, we expect installation to commence in the second quarter of calendar year 2024, and that powder production will commence in the fourth quarter of calendar year 2024. Tennessee has proven to be business-friendly, and they welcomed our sense of urgency. As I've shared with many of you, in 5 weeks from the very first meeting on June 8th, we signed binding agreements with 5 different counterparties in Tennessee. It really was quite remarkable the way that they mobilized to support us. I would like to personally thank Governor Bill Lee of Tennessee, Stuart McWhorter, the Governor's Commissioner of Economic Development, United States Senator Bill Hagerty, who is on the Appropriations Committee, I might add, as is U.S. Congressman Chuck Fleischmann. Their advocacy and support have positioned Tennessee at the center of the manufacturing renaissance in the U.S. I would also like to acknowledge Tennessee Valley Authority. The TVA and local utilities have invested heavily in electricity infrastructure to meet the demands of industry today and in the future. By way of example, 140 megawatts of capacity have been installed at a dedicated substation for the Spring Branch Industrial Park, where Amaero's facility is located. Moreover, we've signed a 10-year contract with subsidized electricity rates of approximately 5.5 cents per kilowatt hour. Finally, we're excited about the opportunity to collaborate with Oak Ridge National Laboratory, the premier U.S. National Defense Lab. I would argue that the most significant accomplishment over the past 12 months culminated in July and August with the hiring of Eric Bono, Chris Scanlon, Jay Chandran, Fred Yolton, and Dave Schmidt. We have amongst the strongest and most experienced team in the industry with deep experience in powder metallurgy and additive manufacturing. Ken Davis will be instrumental in working with Eric and the team to liaison with our customers and to position Amaero as a valued partner and supplier of choice. Not since Sputnik in 1957 has the United States ceded a primacy capability to another superpower. Though the U.S. first developed hypersonics, China and Russia surpassed the capabilities and commercialized hypersonic missiles. The U.S. is racing to commercialize hypersonic platforms such as a hypersonic scramjet missile at Mach 20, and with advanced propulsion systems, the hypersonic application demand advanced materials such as C-103 and refractory alloys. Further, the component's complex geometry and integrated cooling channels are well suited, in some cases uniquely suited, for 3D printing. To the extent that you listen to an earnings call of a defense prime contractor such as Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, or RTX, you will invariably hear executives touting their hypersonic developments and the promise of large contracts for the next generation of weaponry programs. At the same time, leadership of Department of Defense and the Air Force will highlight the woeful inadequacy and vulnerability in the supply chain for critical materials such as C-103. On this page, please note the quote from the U.S. Air and Space Force. This is a report they commissioned in May of 2023 about the vulnerabilities in the supply chain in general. Next page, please. Following our discussions with leading defense research labs and indications of demand from prime defense contractors and first-tier suppliers, Amaero announced that we would dedicate the production of the first atomizer to C-103, the niobium alloy. As the demand for C-103 ramps, we will utilize excess production capacity to produce high-value specialty alloy powders that will be utilized in the next generation of defense systems. Amaero is uniquely positioned to be the supplier of choice for C-103 and high-value specialty alloy powders. First, given the high melting temperature, as an example, Ti-64 has a melting temperature of 1,600 degrees Celsius, whereas C-103's melting temperature is 50% higher, or about 2,350 degrees Celsius. Many of the atomization systems can't operate at the higher temperature. Second, many of the large powder producers have long production cycles and are not well suited for smaller batch production runs. Lastly, atomization, and this is important, I would add, and powder production is the core of Amaero and our strategy going forward. This is the essence of who we are and what we will do. For many of the material companies who produce powder, it'll be less than 5% of their revenue and a non-core commercial pursuit. The U.S. Department of Defense has identified castings and forgings supply chain as one of the 4 most pressing vulnerabilities and threats to U.S. and allied countries' national security. The critical shortage of forging capacity in the U.S. and allied countries has resulted in untenable, long lead times for parts, resulting in a large percentage of military assets which are out of service. As an example, it's estimated that more than 10% of F-35s are grounded, awaiting service, parts, and refurbishment. Before I turn to Eric Bono, we gathered the technical team in Tennessee about a month ago to finalize the engineering and the design of fit out for our facility. We have a brief video to introduce other members of the Amaero team and to show you the facility that will be home to the manufacturing, applied research and development, and corporate headquarters in Tennessee.
Amaero's reason for being is to enable domestic source of these advanced metal powders in the U.S., as well as manufacturing large near-net shape components that no one else can manufacture at this point.
We are planning to integrate with the supply chain in America, on American soil.
The industry has evolved from a subtractive manufacturing focus to an additive manufacturing focus.
The raw materials that go into those applications have to be flawless, zero contamination, just absolutely perfect.
What we're doing here is something that is very much in need domestically, is very much in need with all of the allied nations.
The work that we're doing here is critical.
There's not too many customers that are more demanding than the U.S. government. These applications are on literally the bleeding edge of capabilities.
The materials and the products are evolving every day.
The rocket, the aerospace, the jet technology that we're going to be using today and we're going to be using 50 years from now.
We are working on cutting edge. You cannot get more real than this.
Customers have made it crystal clear what they expect from us, and that's what we're going to deliver.
This facility will be producing 800 metric tons of powder under one roof.
100,000 square feet is very big, but also our goals are big, and the market that we serve is very large as well.
This is a big room of possibilities.
Right now, we are in the geographic center of our factory. If you follow me, this is where there is going to be a wall that is going to demarcate the EIGA production, which has a potential to install up to 5 EIGAs. We'll have EIGA 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is the production room.
So we have a very skilled team. We're able to go to market. We'll stand up our EIGA unit and our atomizer technology.
And I've also been inspired by the team we've been able to put together here.
University of Tennessee, Knoxville is right there. They've got a good engineering school. So we plan to draw from there.
There will be a lot of brain power here, and hopefully that inspires people to go get their degree and come work for Amaero.
So when you put all that together, it's a really big opportunity for us.
We feel that we are positioned very well for future success, and it all starts at the facility that we're standing in here today.
Thank you. Jay Chandran, by the way, who's in the blue shirt in this video, the largest acquisition Berkshire Hathaway ever made was a company called PCC, Precision Cast Parts. It was an aerospace manufacturing company. Jay opened up 2 of their greenfield manufacturing operations. Will lead our operations, is leading the fit out, the installation of the equipment. It's a great, great asset that we have. To my left, Eric Bono, who is going to speak shortly, has joined us as President and Chief Technical Officer. And to my right, Chris Scanlon, who's joined us as CFO and Chief Administration Officer. And with that, Eric, I'll turn it to you.
Thank you. Real quick, speaking of blue shirts, so I planned to wear that shirt today, then I realized it was on the video. So no big deal, I changed my shirt, but the jacket that I have is plaid. So when I put it on, it was not appropriate. So here I am. So good morning, everyone. Before I say my comments, kind of looking forward, I want to take a second to really publicly thank you, Hank, and the board for giving me an opportunity to join the team and help lead it through this quite exciting transition. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so I want to hit on several key milestones that we'll meet over the next year to give you a sense of where we're heading as a company, and maybe more importantly, the value that we're going to create over the next year. The majority of these goals are in focus already, with great progress being made every day. So we're going to talk these high value milestones. I tend to see the business in 4 buckets. So one is the facility and the equipment within that facility. That's kind of one bucket. The second is operations or production. So what are you making out of that equipment that's in the facility? Third bucket is commercialization, or how do you make money on what you made? And then the final bucket that we'll talk about is how do you wrap that all around a really high quality process and keep it all safe. So next slide, please. So typically we'll talk about, in these to come, we'll talk about safety first, because it really is the most important thing that we do. Given where we're at in our maturity, I think it makes sense to leave that for last today, but in the future, those will show up first. Okay, so we have finalized the Tennessee facility floor plan, and we'll complete the fit out over the next year to allow full production of powder and the as-hip near net shape parts that Hank talked about. The production area is given priority over literally everything else. If we need to work on a picnic table, as long as we're making powder, that's what we'll do. By mid next year, we expect to have the majority of the complete facility fit out. Our first atomizer, as Hank said, is delivered. It's in the US waiting to ship to our facility. It will be fully commissioned toward the middle of next year. And the second atomizer should be ordered by the end of this calendar year. So things are moving quite rapidly, and will continue to do so. Okay. All right, so now on to operations. So we talked about the building and what's in it. Now, how do we make stuff with it? So, like everyone else, we recognize the struggle in today's global supply chain. What's unique about us, as Hank kind of alluded to, is it offers us a lot of advantages as we start to reshore some of these critical, manufacturing, being both parts and material. However, obviously, we're not immune to exposure there as well. So we are working right now to line up our feedstock suppliers with long-term agreements, and should have that ironed out over the next several months. So we talk a lot about the atomizers because they're sort of the big thing you see when you walk in. It's what actually makes the powder, and they are important. But there's a lot of ancillary. Oh, I think you went ahead. Oh, sorry. So there's a lot of ancillary equipment that still needs to be bought, commissioned, so that we're working on that. And these are things like screeners, blenders, packaging equipment. So kind of what you do with the powder after it's atomized. There's quite a bit of work there. That will all be installed and commissioned by the end of next year as well. Next slide, thanks. Yeah, so everybody, this is an important part maybe. So everybody wants to talk about commercial, and I do as well. And we have a lot of exciting things already going on here. So we're already in discussion with leading users of the C103 alloy that Hank talked about, this high temperature refractory alloy. And we'll have multiple qualification trials going on certainly by the end of next year once we start making powder. And as we get closer to production, we will have our first offtake agreements. We're in discussion already with a fairly large user of this powder. And to give you a sense, our model for next year, the financial model, we have about 3 tons of powder being made next year in the model. This agreement we're talking about with this customer for next year is going to settle probably between 3 and 5 tons. So I guess 2 things. That's great news, and it also shows the how conservative the model is that we built. Okay, third bullet there. So our as-hip near-net shape work is also getting quite a bit of interest, and we're visiting a lot of customers on it. We expect to have multiple commercial contracts under our belt and delivered by the end of next year. And finally, given the sensitive nature of the industries we're working on and the work that we're doing and the tie-in and importance to national defense, we expect to execute at least one what they call CRADA, Cooperative Research and Development Agreement with a national lab by the end of the first quarter, and likely one more by the end of next year. And these are key for us to keep on the sort of cutting edge of where these refractories are going. Okay, and I think nope. Whoops,
Sorry, just 1 second.
Okay, I can chat while you get up to it. So the last one is about this quality and safety. You know, and our safety goals are, you know, obviously 0 work time injuries. And that extends to our employees, our visitors, our vendors, but also the community that we live in and work in. So we are working very closely with the agencies within our area where the facility is, to make sure that everyone knows exactly what's going on there and what risks and how we're mitigating those risks. Our internal quality lab is well on its way to being set up so that we can ensure that every gram of powder that leaves our facility has the pedigree and quality that our customers demand. And finally, we've already started work on quality certification. So the most sort of the base one is this ISO 9001. At the same time, we're on a parallel path. We're also pursuing AS 9100, which is aerospace standard for quality. So we hope to have those. We will have our work completed. We hope to have it audited and certified by the end of next calendar year as well. So with that, I'll turn it back to you.
Great. Thank you, Eric. I would add that one of the things we commented on in July when we announced Tennessee is, you know, we've been one that have said very little unless we had something substantive to report, right? We haven't been one to announce MOUs or LOIs or things such as that. And we said with confidence in July, we expected the cadence for our announcements to pick up. I think you've seen that since then, the facility, the team, C103, the expectation of the next 6 months is more of the same. So we've got a number of things right now that we expect to culminate from a commercial standpoint, from a fit out and installation standpoint, as well as from a financing and capital standpoint. And so again, we'll only announce we have things substantive to announce, but we would expect a continued cadence of announcements. With that, 2024 will be a hallmark year for Amaero. We will fanatically focus on execution and on delivering the important milestones. I'm confident that over the next year, the broader market will come to better understand and a better value Amaero's differentiated capabilities and the large market opportunity. There will be a chance to ask questions, which is actually my favorite part of the meeting. We'll do that after the formal part of the AGM. So please submit your questions if you'd like now, but again, we will come to those shortly. With that, we will turn to the formal business. We'll now move to the formal business as set out in the notice of meeting. The notice of annual general meeting was mailed to all registered members on or about 29 of September 2023 and is to be taken as read. Voting on all resolutions will be conducted by poll. For the purposes of the poll, I appoint Adrian Atkinson of Atomic Group, the company's share registry, who has examined and prepared the summaries of the proxy forms received to act as returning officer and to conduct the poll. Shareholders in attendance virtually that have already submitted a vote by proxy should note that your votes will already be counted towards the poll. You do not need to lodge another vote unless you wish to change your proxy instruction. Shareholders in attendance virtually that have not submitted a vote by proxy and wish to vote on the resolutions being put to the meeting today can do so by registering your shareholding with Atomic. Instructions on how to register your holding were provided in the notice of meeting and can also be seen on the screen. Please note that online voting is now open and will remain open until the poll is declared closed. Your votes must have been submitted prior to the poll being closed for them to count. Those shareholders in attendance that are entitled to vote on the poll are all shareholders, representatives, and attorneys of shareholders and proxy holders who hold voting cards. If you're attending in one or more of these capacities, you will have been issued with as many voting cards as you have separate capacities. If anyone believes they're entitled to vote on this poll in any capacity and does not have a voting card in respect thereof, please raise your hand now, and a member of the share registry team will assist you. I see none. At the appropriate time, I'll ask that you mark your vote for the resolution on the voting card. If you're a shareholder and wish to cast all your votes for a resolution, please mark in either the for, against, or abstain box next to the resolution. If you wish to split your votes, please write the number of portion of votes you wish to cast in the corresponding for, against, or abstain boxes. Please note that the sum of the split votes must not exceed your total voting. If you're a proxy holder, a sum of the votes to which you're entitled has been attached to the voting card. If the sum of your votes includes discretionary votes, these are yours to cast at your discretion. If you wish to cast discretionary votes, please mark in the corresponding for, against, or abstain boxes. If your sum of your votes does not have any discretionary votes, you do not need to mark your voting card and will simply need to hand it in to the returning officer at the end of the resolutions. After all resolutions have been read and voted upon, please place it in one of the ballot boxes that will be circulated in the room. Are there any questions in relation to the voting process? I see none. Proxies have been inspected and all those validly lodged have been accepted. All undirected proxies or open votes that have been nominated by the chair of the meeting or their proxy will be cast in favor of each resolution in the notice of the annual general meeting. We'll now proceed the resolution set out in the notice. First item of business is to receive and consider the company's annual financial report together with the director and auditor's reports for the period ending 30 June 2023. The financial report and the reports of the directors and the auditors are now laid before the meeting. There will be no vote taken on this item. It's for discussion only. The company's auditors for the 2023 financial year, Deepak Keshavamurthy from RSM Australia, is present to take questions relevant to the conduct of the audit and the preparation and content of the independent auditor's report. Are there any questions or comments on the financial report or reports of the directors and auditors? Seeing none. Are there any questions or comments on the management of the company? Seeing none. Are there any questions relevant to the conduct of the audit and the preparation and content of the auditor's report to be put to the auditor? Seeing none. We now proceed to resolutions set out in the notice of annual general meeting. Resolution 1. The first resolution to be voted on today relates to the adoption of the 2023 remuneration report. We have these slides going up as well.
Yes.
Thank you. If you wish to discuss this resolution, please raise your hand, or if attending virtually, submit your questions via Q&A. And I'm sorry, I don't see the screen for who's online, so please let me know if we have any questions online that need to be attended to. If not, I'll proceed, but please let me know if we have any questions online.
No, we don't have any at the moment.
Okay. The proxies received in relation to this resolution are on the screen. Next one, please. Okay. I now put the motion. Those physically in attendance, please mark your voting instruction on your voting card. Those attending virtually can vote via the online portal. However, we're reminded not to click on next until you've selected your vote for all resolutions. Okay, we'll continue to go through these. The second resolution to be voted on today relates to the election of Robb Vujcic as a director. If you wish to discuss this resolution, please raise your hand, or if attending virtually, submit your question via Q&A. See no questions.
No question.
The proxies received in relation to this resolution are on the screen. I now put the motion. Those physically in attendance, please mark your voting instruction on your voting card. Those attending virtually can vote via online portal. Resolution 3 relates to the election of Eric Levy as director. If you wish to discuss this resolution, please raise your hand, or if attending virtually, submit your questions via Q&A. The proxies received in relation to this resolution are on the screen. I now put the motion. Those physically in attendance, please mark your voting instruction on your voting card. Those attending virtually can vote via the online portal. The fourth resolution to be voted on today relates to the election of Bob Latta as a director. If you wish to discuss the resolution, please raise your hand, or if attending virtually, submit your questions via the Q&A. Again, please let me know if any questions are submitted online. Thank you. The proxies received in relation to this resolution are on the screen. I now put the motion. Those physically in attendance, please mark your voting instruction on your voting card. Those attending virtually can vote via the online portal. The fifth resolution to be voted on today relates to the election of Eric Bono as a director. If you wish to discuss this resolution, please raise your hand, or if attending virtually, please submit your questions via Q&A.
No questions.
The proxies received in relation to this resolution are on the screen. I now put the motion. Those physically in attendance, please mark your voting instruction on the voting card. Those attending virtually can vote via the online portal. The sixth resolution to be voted on today relates to the election of Jamie Levy as a director. If you wish to discuss this resolution, please raise your hand, or if attending virtually, submit your questions via Q&A.
No questions.
The proxies received in relation to this resolution are on the screen. I now put the motion. Those physically in attendance, please mark your voting instructions. Those attending virtually can vote via online. On the seventh resolution to be voted today relates to the approval of 10% placement capacity. If you wish to discuss the resolution, please raise your hand, or if attending virtually, please submit your question. The proxies received in relation to this resolution are on the screen. I now put the motion. Those physically in attendance, please mark your voting instruction. Those attending virtually can vote online. The eighth resolution to be voted on today relates to the approval of securities issued under the Amaero Employee Incentive Plan. I believe this one, perhaps, Lucy, given that I am an executive director, why don't I have you, if you wouldn't mind? I'll introduce Lucy Vujcic. I believe just this one here relating to Resolution 8. Yes, please.
Yeah. Lucy.
Good morning, everyone. Resolution 8. The eighth resolution to be voted on today relates to the approval of securities issued under the Amaero Employee Incentive Plan. If you wish to discuss this resolution, please raise your hand, or if attending virtually, submit your questions via Q&A. See no questions?
Okay.
Next one. One is the next one.
Yeah, and they should be on the board. So the proxies received in relation.
All right. Proxies received in relation to this resolution are on the screen. I now put the motion. Those physically in attendance, please mark your voting instruction on the voting card. Those attending virtually can vote via the online portal. Now,
okay.
Tell me.
Thank you.
Hank, this one should be done by Eric.
So the this one, if you'll do as well, relates to myself.
Whichever director.
Yep. So the first part of the ninth resolution.
The first part, we're up to Resolution 9A, grant of options to Mr. Hank Holland. The first part of the ninth resolution to be voted on today relates to the grant of options to Mr. Hank Holland. If you wish to discuss this resolution, please raise your hand, or if attending virtually, submit your questions via the Q&A. I see no hands and there are no questions.
Yep.
Next slide. The proxies received in relation to this resolution are on the screen. I now put the motion. Those physically in attendance, please mark your voting instruction on the voting card. Those attending virtually can vote via the online portal.
And one more, please.
The second part of the ninth resolution to be voted on today relates to the grant of options to Mr. Hank Holland. If you wish to discuss this resolution, please raise your hand, or if attending virtually, submit your questions via the Q&A. See no questions. Can we have the next slide? The proxies received in relation to this resolution are on the screen. I now put the motion. Those physically in attendance, please mark your voting instruction on your voting card. Those attending virtually can vote online via the online portal. I now hand it to the chair. There you go, Hank.
Thank you very much, Lucy. Thanks. The first part of the 10th resolution to be voted on today relates to the grant of options to Miss Lucy Robb Vujcic. If you wish to discuss the resolution, please raise your hand, or if attending virtually, submit your question in the QA. Those physically in attendance, please mark your voting instructions on your voting card. Those attending virtually can vote via the online portal.
No questions.
No questions. Thank you. The proxies received in relation to this resolution are on the screen. I now put the motion. Those physically in attendance, please mark your voting instruction. Those attending virtually can vote via the online portal. The second part of the 10th resolution to be voted on today relates to the grant of options to Miss Lucy Robb Vujcic. If you wish to discuss the resolution, please raise your hand, or if attending virtually, submit your question via Q&A.
No questions.
The proxies, thank you. Proxies received in relation to this resolution are on the screen. I now put the motion. Those physically in attendance, please mark your voting instruction on your voting card. Those attending virtually can vote via the online portal. The first part of the 11th resolution to be voted on today relates to the grant of options to Mr. Amaero. If you wish to discuss the resolution, please raise your hand, or if attending virtually, submit your questions via Q&A.
No questions.
Thank you. The proxies received in relation to this resolution are on the screen. I now put the motion. Those physically in attendance, please mark your voting instruction on your voting card. Those attending virtually can vote online. The second part of the 11th resolution to be voted on today relates to the grant of options to Mr. Amaero. If you wish to discuss this resolution, please raise your hand, or if attending virtually, submit your questions via Q&A.
No questions.
Thank you. The proxies received in relation to this resolution are on the screen. I now put the motion. Those physically in attendance, please mark your voting instruction on your voting card. Those attending virtually can vote online. The first part of the 12th resolution to be voted on today relates to the grant of options to Mr. Eric Levy. If you wish to discuss the resolution, please raise your hand, or if attending virtually, submit your question online.
No questions.
Thank you. The proxies received in relation to this resolution are on the screen. I now put the motion. Those physically in attendance, please mark your voting instruction on your card. Those attending virtually via the online portal. The second part of the 12th resolution to be voted on today relates to the grant of options to Mr. Eric Levy. If you wish to discuss the resolution, please raise your hand, or attending virtually, submit your questions online.
No questions.
Thank you. The proxies received in relation to this resolution are on the screen. I now put the motion. Those physically in attendance, please mark your voting instruction on the voting card. Those attending virtually can vote online. The first part of the 13th resolution to be voted on today relates to the grant of options to Mr. Robert Latta. If you wish to discuss this resolution, please raise your hand, or if attending virtually, submit your question via Q&A.
No questions.
Thank you. The proxies received in relation to this resolution are on the screen. I now put the motion. Those physically in attendance, please mark your voting instruction on your voting card. Those attending virtually can vote via the online portal. The second part of the 13th resolution to be voted on today relates to the grant of options to Mr. Robert Latta. If you wish to discuss this resolution, please raise your hand, or if attending virtually, submit your question via Q&A.
No questions.
Thank you. The proxies received in relation to this resolution are on the screen. I now put the motion. Those physically in attendance, please mark your voting instruction on the voting card. Those attending virtually can vote online. The 14th resolution we voted on today relates to the grant of options to Mr. Eric Bono. If you wish to discuss this resolution, please raise your hand, or if attending virtually, submit your question online.
No questions.
Thank you. Proxies received in relation to this resolution are on the screen. I now put the motion. Those physically attendants, please mark your voting instruction on your voting card. Those attending virtually can vote via the online portal. The 15th resolution to be voted on today relates to the grant of options to Mr. David Hanna. If you wish to discuss this resolution, please raise your hand, or if attending virtually, submit questions via Q&A.
No questions.
Thank you. The proxies received in relation to this resolution are on the screen. I now put the motion. Those physically attendants, please mark your voting instruction on your voting card. Those attending virtually can vote via the online portal. The 16th resolution to be voted on today relates to the grant of options to Mr. Jamie Levy. If you wish to discuss this resolution, please raise your hand, or if attending virtually, submit your question online.
No questions.
Thank you. The proxies received in relation to this resolution are on the screen. I now put the motion. Those physically in attendance, please mark your voting instruction. Those attending virtually can vote online. That concludes the resolutions to be voted on today. As noted, we're conducting a poll on all resolutions. I note the poll is already open. Can all shareholders voting online please now ensure they've submitted their votes? I will allow another minute before the poll is closed. If you have any questions in relation to the submission of online votes, please send them through the Q&A function now. For those shareholders attending physically, I now invite Adrian Atkinson from Atomic to collect your voting cards. I note all cards have been collected. Any questions online?
No questions.
Thank you. There being no further questions, I declare the poll closed. The staff of Atomic will now process the poll, and the results will be announced to the ASX once they are available. If there's any other business that can be lawfully brought forward, please speak.
Nothing online.
Okay. Nothing live. That concludes the formal part of the business. I now invite shareholders and other participants to ask questions. This, as I mentioned, is certainly to me the most enjoyable part of the meeting. So with that, we'll begin live. We'll take questions online as well. It's always my preference where we can to take the questions directly from our shareholders. Some will choose to type it in, and if you could please facilitate that, Russell. Maybe we start live.
Yeah, so just
We've got a microphone over here as well.
So real quick, just if you'd like, if you're online, my name is Russell Katz. I'm with the Capital Network. If you have any questions and you'd like to speak, please do type that into the Q&A. Just say I would like to speak, or if you just want to type your question out, please type your question out. But we are going to start live. So if anybody has any questions, please come up to this microphone, which is active, and you can ask your question directly.
Stephen.
Hold on one sec, just so that people online can hear it.
You talked a bit about C103, first cab off the rank with the first atomizer. And obviously, apart from titanium, can you give us a sense, or is the company getting close to making a decision about what other powders they're looking at potentially manufacturing with 2, 3, 4, and 5?
Yeah, it's a great question. And beginning even with the first atomizer, if I can comment on, Stephen. So we will announce later this year an extensive study. So we have recently retained a group called Fairmont Consulting that is the premier consulting firm in the U.S., or I should say one of the premier consulting firms in the U.S. relating to the defense ecosystem. One of the challenges that we have with C103 and with hypersonic programs in general is much of the work is being conducted in the classified domain, right? Moreover, much of the work is in the development phase, yet to go to commercialization, albeit all indications are it's very late in the development phase. So we have had conversations with groups such as Air Force Research Lab, Oak Ridge National Lab, the forefront of the materials part of the development, working with first-tier primes. We've had conversations with defense primes. We've had conversations with first-tier suppliers, groups such as Castion come to mind that are very, very active in the refractory space, working with hypersonics. On that basis, for internal purposes and planning purposes, we built an extensive model. And we have made what we feel are conservative assumptions based on demand pull signals that have been indicated to us. That being said, that's not exhaustive. And so we've retained Fairmont Consulting. The expectation is we'll have their raw data back in early December. I would expect that we would then combine that data with all the other consulting data we have right now. If you think about line of sight of these important deliverables, as Eric mentioned, we finished the design and engineering of the building. So we'll have final bids on that construction cost. We'll have final specifications and all the ancillary equipment and multiple bids on that. We'll have all of our various quality certifications lined up. And so I would expect early next year, we would come out with a fairly comprehensive report, that is, that we would lodge with the ASX and share with shareholders that would provide comprehensive information and third-party indications of demand as well as pricing, right? And I think understandably, one of the issues the ASX is very focused on, for our own internal purposes, we have our own models and we're using this to inform our planning. But to the extent we're going to communicate with shareholders, I think the ASX understandably wants to see third-party validation of those demand, third-party validation of those prices. And we would hope to have that early next year. Directly to your question, Stephen, what that means is the first atomizer, and if we've communicated publicly before, we've got capacity of about 200 tons of total powder production. As we've communicated as well, we expect that roughly 50% of that yield will be the highest value powder bed fusion spectrum powder. So call it 100 tons. As Eric alluded to, we are conservatively assuming the ramp up of C103. So we're not assuming certainly that we'll be at 3 shifts initially, not even 2 shifts, not even all of 1 shift for C103. And yet the economics, because the price of C103 is so much higher than titanium 6.4 that prior guidance was on, even partial capacity of the first atomizer, we would expect to have more favorable economics than full capacity of multiple atomizers for Ti 6.4, right? So that's a general overview. And again, we will come back with more explicit direction supported by extensive third parties, as I said. And I would hope that we would do that early next year. The other part of the Fairmont consulting analysis we asked them to do is, A, give us demand signals on what do we expect the production demand will be for C103, and then B, create a spectrum. If C103 is all the way to the left and Ti 6.4 is all the way to the right, okay, left to right, what are the highest value specialty alloys from a price standpoint? And what are those alloys that are the most attractive from a demand supply standpoint? And that would then inform what we would use our excess capacity of the first atomizer. Does that answer the question? Great. Thanks, Stephen.
Does anybody else in person have a question at this time? Go to online questions.
Go to online questions. And again, please feel free to share if others in the room have questions.
So we have two written questions at this time. So Paul Boalesta asks, as Amaero hasn't actually used the IGAR atomizer to produce C103 yet, what makes you confident that the unit can actually get the job done? Do you expect commissioning delays because of this?
Yeah. So let me make a high level comment. I'm going to turn this over to Eric. And by the way, I say the most significant accomplishment I feel that has happened in the last 12 months is attracting the team that we attracted. We all know how difficult it is to raise capital in this market. More difficult than raising capital is attracting the best people, right? All the people we've attracted had very sound careers, very senior positions, established families, roots in communities. And bringing Eric over, Jay over, Chris over, others over, I think is a significant testament to what we're doing. To your question, Paul, number one, our atomizer was manufactured in Germany. We've done about 1 ton of trials on the atomizer. That was done with Ti 6.4 from a material standpoint. So we have extensive data from the 1 ton of trials that we've done. Separate from that, we've had conversations with the manufacturer. They currently operate, we have the second atomizer in the world that was produced. The first one was installed in Germany. Currently it's producing titanium aluminide. They have also worked with other refractory metals, including tungsten, including, I'm not sure if it was specifically niobium, but other very high temperature refractory alloys. And one of the unique things about our EIGA, electrode inert gas atomizer technology, is Ti-64, as I mentioned in my remarks, the melting point of C103 is 50% higher. It's at about 2,350 degrees Celsius is the melting point of C103. So most of the technology that are used to atomize powder, right, where you're putting things into a crucible, if you will, and it's on the material and you melt it, are not capable of operating that higher temperature environment. It's one of the unique things about the atomizer. So yes, they have produced powder, refractory powder, higher temperature powder. We've done a fair amount of consulting with them. We have no reason to expect that there will be challenges. At the very same time, to understand, when you buy an atomizer like this, you don't plug it in, turn it on, and it produces powder. A lot of the IP that we will bring to this is we will overlay on top of this a process optimization, a parameter optimization. And I'm going to turn it over to Eric. This is an area that Eric Bono, who for 20 years has worked closely with Fred Yelton, who we hired. Fred Yelton literally invented gas atomization, right? Dave Schmidt, who we've hired, is one of the foremost experts in numeric modeling for powder metallurgy and producing powder. So we're highly confident we'll get there, but why don't you maybe talk a bit about that process and what we'd expect?
On the IP side?
On the IP side, and also, you know, here we are going to be producing C103, right, versus Ti-64, where the, you know, our material trials initially were from.
Yeah. So, Paul, I don't see really any technical risk of making C103. You know, Hank's saying this is the first, you know, the second atomizer that's out there this generation. He's true. There's first generations of these atomizers out there. I ran one, and they have made C103 successfully. So there's really no technical reason to think that the second generation should have any issues. On the IP side, you know, the atomizer manufacturer, they don't really run these things, right? They get them in their plant and they get it running just good enough to fulfill the contractual needs to be able to sell it. So they're not really experts at all in production. That's where we will become the experts and gain the IP. And the actual unit itself, to give you, we probably should have had a video of it maybe, but it's really simple. It's a bar that goes down through an induction coil, drips off, and you hit it with high pressure argon. So all the magic is right there. It's right where that nozzle is. And that's where we have the expertise to model very complex physics that's going on there with gas and extremely hot molten liquid, how it breaks up, forms into spheres, and solidifies. So those sort of nuances is where we will become experts and have I think a pretty decent landscape for IP going forward.
Yeah, what I would add, it ties into this and kind of the commercial side of that question. If there's so much demand for C103 and it's so critical, why wouldn't other producers step in to fill this void, right? There's nothing unique in some ways about Amaero, right? And I think that's a very valid question, albeit not asked. There are great producers in the US and in Europe. So ATI, the former Allegheny in the US, fantastic world-class producer. Höganäs in Sweden, fantastic world-class producer. Tekna in Canada, wonderful world-class producer. The challenge is a couple-fold, I would add. And this is where I think Amaero has a real differentiated advantage. Number one, these companies are large industrial companies, of which powder is a very small part of their business. So ATI has a specialty alloys subsidiary that's about 4% of its revenue. Within that subsidiary is powder. It's something less than 4% of revenue. They don't disclose exactly what it is, but it's something less than 4% of revenue. 96% of their business is other. Moreover, they have very large equipment with large production runs and large production output. So if you contact these large producers, and we know this firsthand, they would quote you a price of X, and they would tell you a delivery period is about 24 months. So the reason Air Force Research Lab or Oak Ridge National Lab or First Tier Primes proactively reached out to us when we're landing this EIGA in the US was, we have 200 tons of capacity of the state-of-the-art equipment in the world, and we've yet to commit that production. And this is where I say, you know, you work really, really hard, and then you hope you get lucky. We got lucky, right? 18 months ago, this piece of equipment was commissioned, It landed in the US about 3 weeks ago. And it happened to coincide with this development in hypersonics. And oh, by the way, we've attracted a team that has this expertise that industry then sought us and our help, right, to step in. And these are the announcements I think you'll see forthcoming over the next 6 months will be some of these commercial relationships. And I would say to you, when you see our offtake agreements, when you see our commercial agreements, look at it, yes, from a financial implication standpoint. How large is the order? But I would say, as or more importantly, look at it as who is our partner? And where does that place us in this development landscape? And I would say that when you look at it with the observation of both of those. And the latter, in some ways, this early offtake, I think will be more important.
I'm gonna open the floor again to questions live.
Sam, please.
Just 1 second. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, well done, Hank, for your good work so far since you've taken over, and welcome the new team. Looking forward to a much more brighter future than it was previously. I'm just curious with the C103 powder. You've obviously gone out and committed the first IGA to 100% C103. Maybe a question for Eric. Eric, so like, I assume this is an ironclad agreement or of some sort because you've gone out and stated it publicly. There's no offtake yet because obviously, I guess that's coming. But what sort of assurances do you have from whoever it is that's sort of nudged you in that direction that they will deliver an offtake agreement, and how can we think about it? Because it's quite important you get this up and running. Your cash flow, I assume, looks pretty good, and that helps your expansion. It reduces the need for further capital to get to IGA number 5. So it's quite a pivotal decision. If you can give us some color, that'd be great.
Yeah, let me comment on the premise, and then I'm going to turn it to Eric to comment on our relationship with our commercial partners. So to be clear, what we've committed to and what we've committed essentially our commercial partners is the first atomizer, which has 200 tons of production, 100 tons of capacity for powder bed fusion. We will dedicate to C103. Okay, you can have up to 100 tons of capacity for powder bed fusion spectrum powder. Now, that being said, we do not expect that we will have 100 tons of demand day one, right? As the commercialization ramps up for C103. What this allows us to do, Sam, if you think about it, is A, we can go to our development partners and we will sign offtake agreements for a portion of that. And we'll begin to scope and gauge what the demand profile will be in calendar year 24, calendar year 25, calendar year 26. And then we can backfill with whatever excess capacity we have, both on the development standpoint. So for example, one of the things that Eric could touch on, we're already in discussions with these labs about what's next after C103. Call it C104, if you will, right? And so we'll have capacity to do development alloy work with them alongside the production of C103. And then likewise, other very, very high value specialty alloys that are in this next generation, be it the high temperature operating environment, whatever the case may be, likewise, we'll have that. Another example that it gives us, imagine, if you will, and we've had this discussion, that we go to a commercial partner and the commercial partner says, look, I have line of sight demand in calendar year 25 to 20 tons of need. Okay. But that demand signal is blurry, right? Part of it depends on, as we go from development to commercialization, what programs are appropriated, how quickly do they commercialize? So what they want to be able to do is they need flexibility in their supply chain. So now if we say to that commercial partner, give us an offtake agreement for 10 tons a year, and we'll allow you to flex up to 100% with 3 months notice. The competitors have 24-month lead time. If I can give them a 3-month lead time, I've already got unused capacity. It really costs me nothing, right? Other than planning my production runs over time. So that's another area I think we'll be able to go to the commercial market with a real value add, is allowing them to flex as we have some of this underused capacity until we get fully up to speed. I will tell you, even in our out years, all we've assumed for internal planning purposes is 1.5 shifts of 3. There's 3 shifts total. 1.5 shifts of C103 production. Now, mind you, 1 shift of C103 production, the economics are about the same as 3 shifts on 4 IGAs of Ti 6.4. right? So there's a significant multiplier. So that's the type thing we'll come back with some specifics when we have, independently validated market data to share with the markets. You want to touch on, from the commercial standpoint, whether it's development or industry, why Amaero, right? Again, there's a lot of other great producers out there, and so much of this interest that we've received has been inbound, unsolicited interest. It really has been a demand pull, not a selling something. What's a bit of that background, if you will?
Yeah, good question. And really to echo Hank's point, I would say the first atomizer is dedicated to high temperature refractories, right? So the C103 and other alloys. So everybody, all across the DoD is trying to find sort of the next C103, and C103 is expensive, extremely expensive. It's more than $2,000 a kilogram, mainly because of hafnium. It's like 9.2% hafnium, something like that. Crazy expensive. So this ties in with Hank's question to me, I promise, why they're working with us. We have excess capacity, right? The other guys do not, that can do it, and they have smaller units and they don't have capacity to do it. So people want to team up with us for two reasons. Number one, to get the C103 that they can't get. And number two, to work with us on sort of the next, whatever that next alloy is, because we have the capacity. So if they can get both of those together from a sort of a proven technology and a proven team, they're anxious to do so. Part of the struggle, if we would have stuck with Tie 6.4, for instance, and we know, one of the airframe companies wants to use it for a bracket, it's pretty easy, right? We can forecast their build rates and what the weight of the bracket is. We could sit up here and show you the math. It's difficult in this world because most of the programs are classified. So we don't know often, in fact, hardly ever, what our customers are using it for. And sometimes even our customers are shielded a little bit by the time the data rolls back, say, to the Air Force or NASA. So it is difficult, but obviously we feel very bullish and confident that.
And I would tell you that where we feel we have line of sight to demand, and I want to speak in generalities, but where we feel we have line of sight demand, if you look at the guidance that we had given before via ASX announcements from Tie 6.4, I think it accelerates the achievement of those economics by a couple of years, right? And then, of course, longer term, the terminal value of that revenue and the terminal value of that EBITDA presumably is higher, given the nature of the price of C103, right? So again, I want to keep it generalities that we comment on, but that's a big deal. And I think the other big deal that you as a shareholder care about is these businesses require capital. They require capital for OpEx. They require capital for CapEx. As a shareholder myself, I think of this from a free cash flow standpoint, right? How quickly can we get to, we've got positive free cash flow, that the business funds OpEx and CapEx, and there's no longer a need for external capital, right? That's front and center to my mind as a shareholder that doesn't want to be diluted. I think this materially accelerates achievement of that by a lot. And I think the way I think about it in the way that I think matters to shareholders is calendar year 24 is going to be a really, really important year. We're going to finish the fit out of the facility. We're going to commission our equipment. We're going to begin producing powder. And as we go into calendar year 25, we will be free cash flow positive. That would be my expectation. That has a lot of very, very serious implications as you think of de-risking the business and setting the business on a course that can self-fund over time. Hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, if I may, to I think tie into exactly what Hank's saying. The choice to go with these higher price materials, right? It's more than 10x, say what Tie 6.4 is. That's great, but what it also buys us is much less volume, right? So we're saying these milestones and we want to hit them. We fully intend to hit them. We all know, right? Things often don't go as you write it down on a piece of paper. So as challenges come up, it will be much easier to bounce back and absorb them going this route than it would be if we had to be full scale production in Tie 6.4 on July 1 or something like that. So I think that's important to point out.
I might just ask a second question.
Yeah,
if I
Stephen.
may. Just on the Inflation Reduction Act and other programs which the US government have announced over the last year or so. I'm assuming Amaero is looking at other forms of funding in terms of non-dilutive capital? Can you possibly just give us a sense there?
Yeah, and this is an area that I think Amaero is very fortunate. If you think about, look, we all have our strengths and weaknesses. To the extent I have any strengths, my strengths are strategy, my strengths are capital markets, my strengths are finance. I think that the team that we put in place is far more capable than I am from an operational standpoint, right? From a technical background standpoint. But in addition to that, you think of the ecosystem. So we will not announce this. We have hired a consultant that is one of the better known consultants in the US from a lobbying standpoint and getting federal funding standpoint. The reason I say we won't announce this, not that it's a secret, but you go about that in a rather stealth manner. It's not the type thing you announce, I've hired such and such firm to go lobby Congress, right? We have signed an agreement with a firm that Eric has worked with at 2 prior companies very successfully. And I would tell you that the principal of this company is highly confident that given that we are at the intersection of advanced manufacturing, defense production supply chains, and critical materials, that we will, in all likelihood, qualify for significant funding. Now, I would caution investors, and I've been trying to be very careful about this to date. That being said, the nature of those programs, one should expect will take a period of time. Now, I think Eric and I both are in agreement, and speak up, Eric, if you disagree. I think it's quite likely before the end of the fiscal year, we will receive our first award. But it will be on the order of $5 million US, not $50 million US. Okay. So I think we'll be able to check the box of having success during this fiscal year on getting federal funding that's non-dilutive. At the very same time, we will put in motion a number of activities that would take 12, 18, maybe even 24 months, and thus won't be helpful as we think about funding these needs in calendar year 24, that would be much more significant. So we're highly confident we will qualify. I think we're very well suited. I think largely because of Eric's relationships. We now have someone on the team that we've retained that is extremely well placed in this area. I also mentioned in my comments, in Tennessee, our Senator Bill Hagerty is on the Appropriations Committee. In Tennessee, our local Congressman, Chuck Fleischman, is on the Appropriations Committee. Right. So we have a lot of support in Tennessee as well that I think will lead and will assist this. And some of those buckets are smaller buckets. But as an example, Eric and I were talking last night over dinner, there's $100 million pool of money that has to be spent this fiscal year that is specifically for something that we're working on. And that has to be appropriated soon. And that's not the type, that's the type thing you've got a fair amount of discretion how it's appropriated with this particular point of contact Eric has. So I do think we'll get a win on the board, but I would manage investors with a bit of caution that most of this will take longer. And what you won't see us do that I do see other companies in the US do, I just saw one last week of a company that we see quite often, announcing an LOI. You won't see it. Announcing MOU. You won't see it. Right? When we have concrete terms and concrete contracts, we'll announce it.
If I could just jump in here as well, because we have a question that is very heavily related from Julian. He just wants to congratulate the team as well on the achievements to date. But his question was partially answered from you, but I'll read it directly.
Please.
My question is to ask whether you're able to provide any additional comment about future plans to finance the next phases of the business. So I think that if we could kind of discuss a little bit, so you focus on the first phase.
Yep.
And how it's time, but the future plans as we get to 5.
Yep.
If you could discuss that a little more.
So let me, again, in generalities, to some extent, address this and first kind of regurgitate what we provided guidance on prior to this. Prior to this, we provided guidance that we expected that we would need, I believe it was $58 million Australian for CapEx and OpEx kind of through the end of calendar year 24. Subsequently, we provided guidance. We're no longer adding the extension to the building. And again, I credit Eric and Chris, not me. This is something we'd looked at before, and they were able to look at it yet again and find a way to install the current atomization equipment in the building that we have. And this is going to save us both CapEx and OpEx and get us to market more quickly. So if you look at the reductions that we've provided to the market as far as prior to guidance, you could quickly deduce the total capital need through the end of 24 is on the order of $40 million Australian. That's OpEx and CapEx. Okay. We haven't given any more guidance on how we expect to raise that. What I would say though is set aside any non-dilutive funding. And again, I think there's a good likelihood in this fiscal year we'll get some of that, but set that to the side. What I would then expect is in the near term, we will raise equity capital to fund some CapEx and OpEx needs, and we'll do so in a manner as a 39% shareholder that is least dilutive. We'll be very, very mindful of how do we raise capital over time, maintain a strong balance sheet, but do so in such a way that we minimize dilution to existing shareholders. Okay. At the very same time, and Chris is working on this, and again, Chris has got some good relationships and good experience in his prior company as CFO. I do think that you'll see us begin to put a modest amount of debt capacity on the balance sheet. And I say a modest amount because the US, on one hand, it's got a much more mature venture debt and equipment financing market. On the other hand, what they really want to see is they want to see that you've got sufficient equity in your balance sheet to fund about 12 months of runway. Now, we could go out tomorrow and raise equity capital, a big equity raise to fund that. But I'm not inclined to do that. That would be more dilutive. My expectation is as we hit these milestones, the stock will continue to reprice. We can raise money at a later date at a higher price and thus less dilutive. So what I would expect that we would do is you'd raise a relatively small amount of capital on an as-needed basis, put a little bit of debt on the balance sheet, and then sometime next year, as we hit these milestones, raise a more significant amount of equity capital in a least dilutive manner, which would then enable us to use debt more extensively as we go into 2025 and we're cash flow positive. Right. And that's kind of how I would envision layering that over time. We just filed our Appendix 4C, as everyone might have seen. I believe we finished with $5.4 million,
Correct.
$5.4 million of cash in our balance sheet as of the end of September. At the very same time, we currently have an OpEx run rate of about $1 million Australian per month. So it gives you an idea of kind of where we are. And I think that implies that prudently we'll go raise capital at some point. But again, we'll do that in a very thoughtful manner. And I would also say, particularly at this share price, one should be assured that Pegasus would participate. Pegasus would not want to be diluted at this share price. And other shareholders will have to make their own determination of how they feel about that and what's right. But from Pegasus' standpoint, Pegasus certainly would want to participate at this share price.
So I don't know if you have any additional comments on this, but Matt has asked if you could speak specifically to the second atomizer and funding surrounding that.
Yeah, so Eric has been working on this with Jay Chandran, and by the way, Jay, who will get to Australia as well, has been an incredible addition to the team and brings a real depth of operating experience, having stood up 2 prior greenfield manufacturing operations. And importantly to me, has freed Eric's time up to focus on commercial, technical, other issues and not getting bogged down in some of the day-to-day operational issues. And Jay's been fantastic. Jay has been working with our technical team to finalize the specifications on the second IGA. I understand that that is largely done. We've given prior guidance, and I would reaffirm, I would expect we would place a purchase order for the second atomizer this calendar year. And then the way that will work is that will be about a 15-month build, and one would expect progress payments along the way, and then to be delivered sometime in that scenario, kind of the first half of calendar year 25.
Are you able to provide any further information on the spread of the progress payments?
No, I mean, I can provide information on cost. On a cost basis, we're around $3 million US on the second atomizer. Again, there's a fair amount of cost on the ancillary equipment, right? So Eric mentioned earlier blenders. Some of these blenders can be $1 million, right? I mean, there's other significant ancillary equipment. The atomizer itself, about $3 million US. And again, I would, you could generally kind of spread out those payments over 18 months to get a pretty good idea of what would be expected.
Fantastic. I'm gonna open the floor. Does anybody have any questions live? We actually don't have any more questions on online either.
So let me comment on going forward. And first of all, I'm enormously appreciative to our shareholders. I look around this room and I see Ben in the back and Sam and Steven and Phil stepped out. we've just been very, very fortunate to have some shareholders that have been, and they've been a great sounding board for me, right? The ASX is not a market that I have invested in heretofore, and they've been a great and important sounding board. I would also say we've got an incredible, incredible board that's been a great resource. Lucy, who you briefly met in Australia, is a barrister by training. We haven't talked about it, but one of the things that I would add, and Lucy has really taken a lead on this, we have announced we're winding down the Australian operations. In many cases, I think people would logically ask, so what's the cost associated with that? What I would simply say is we would expect to be net cash flow positive from that decision. And Lucy has been very helpful in managing that. As you may recall, we've got an operation in Adelaide. If you look at our balance sheet, the book value of the equipment in Adelaide is zero. The value is something greater than zero, right? And Lucy is working on that, and I expect we'll have something to announce there before too long. So again, there too, we're going to shepherd capital. We're going to minimize what we have to raise. We're going to be very, very smart about making our capital go as far as we can. Mind you, it was a year ago tomorrow, November 1, a year ago, that we announced Pegasus would sub-underwrite a $10.5 million capital raise. All right, that was a year ago. A lot's happened this last year, and it was a lot of hard work. I think what's going forward is a lot of hard work as well, but now at least we're on a growth trajectory. It's a different set of work. Jamie Levy, who's joining the board here, has got some other very interesting contacts. Again, comes from a corporate law and M&A background. In the U.S., we've got an unbelievable board. Amaero Granite, who first got me involved in this, attorney by trade, and actually was the introduction of Lucy to our board. Great M&A background, great private investment background. Eric Levy, much the same, very, very strong private equity background in the U.S. Bob Latta, a partner of mine who I've worked with for 30 years. The most prominent law firm in the entire U.S. for emerging companies is Wilson Sonsini. Bob was partner number 4 since 1979 at Wilson Sonsini. Every company you can think of in Silicon Valley, Apple, Cisco, Microsoft, go down the list, Wilson Sonsini took public. Every one of them, right? And so very, very well known from an emerging market standpoint. And I think one of the things that we'll continue to look at is ASX is absolutely the right place for this company today. You would never want to trade as a public company in the US as a small emerging company, period. Fast forward a year from now, and you think about where we'll be going into calendar year 25 and the revenue that we'll expect to have. The question will then become, will ASX, will we be valued on a fundamental basis the way, for example, a private equity investor in the US would value us? This business, we've received 3 unsolicited calls in the last 2 weeks from 2 financial sponsors and a strategic investor in the US. This business is deemed very, very strategic, right? And so what we've got to focus on the next 12 months is executing. And to the extent we can successfully execute, I think we'll have a lot of options, right? And then we'll continue to weigh what's the best next step for Amaero to unleash and realize and maximize that valuation creation for our shareholders. And that'll be our focus. One thing that I would add is, I think this company, more so than most on the ASX, we have absolute alignment of interest with our shareholders, right? Obviously, Pegasus and myself are 39.2% of this registry. But beyond that, we've created an equity ownership culture with our senior management. When I hired Eric, part of what I promised him is we've got a chance to change your life. I believe that, right? When I look at other executive team, we have reasonably attractive salaries. That's not why they came to Amaero. They came to Amaero to participate in the equity and participate in the value creation and really feeling that we could build something of significant value. And again, the alignment of that interest with our shareholders, right? So Eric as an example, Chris as an example, Jay Chandra and others, in addition to their salary, they received at-the-money options when they joined. At-the-money options implicitly will have 0 value unless we create value going forward, right? Of which I think we can create significant value going forward. But it's even the way we think about incentivizing our key employees and trying to align that with our shareholders. We very, very much appreciate your trust, your continued support. We take it very seriously. And as many of you know, and I talk to many of you quite often, you know, I welcome any communication 24/7. We'll get back to you right away. And again, we very much appreciate the support of our shareholders. Thank you, Russell. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for
That
attending.
concludes the meeting.